The state of Missouri just passed a bill that would ban Kansas City and St. Louis and other radical progressive local governments from passing eviction moratoriums. I'm Tony, and this is Real Estate Investing and Landlord News. Alright, so I have an interesting article for you today, and it's going over the fact that the state of Missouri, the House in the state of Missouri, just passed a bill that would ban local governments from passing their own little eviction moratoriums within the state. Basically, what they're saying is they want all of the local governments within the state to comply with a single state law. They don't want them, passing more restrictive stuff that isn't specifically written out by the state, that isn't, approved by the entire state. And I agree with this. I agree with this 100%. Now, apparently, the Missouri House of Representatives agrees as well, because they overwhelmingly passed this in a bipartisan bill. Okay, so this is something that appealed to politicians on both sides of the aisle. Now, obviously, some people are saying, oh, no, we need to allow local control. The problem with that is that certain governments, and I'm specifically talking about Kansas City and St. Louis and maybe St. Louis County and, the surrounding areas, right? They will try to pass these sort of laws, and you know what? It will be extremely negative for the state overall when these laws pass. So, I don't agree with it. I just don't agree with it. I don't think that, little king or ruler, who is in charge of a city should be imposing these sorts of laws onto the landlords within that little area. Instead, they should be going along with what the state law says. At least for now, this is going to be a good thing. Now, as I mentioned before, the last time I brought up this sort of video, if there is a major political shift where more anti-landlord politicians are present throughout the entire state, this could lock landlords into very negative laws, okay? Because local politicians wouldn't be able to opt out of, like, for example, if they decided, oh, we're going to pass a statewide rent control law, you wouldn't be able to opt out of it. You'd be stuck under that law. Now, I'm not saying that's going to happen, right? Right now, the state of Missouri is more conservative overall and more landlord friendly overall than those little pockets of, the major cities, right? But this is something that could possibly happen in the future. So yeah, for now, this is a good way to make sure that we keep the property rights of landlords in mind before these sort of eviction moratoriums were passed. I am 100% opposed to eviction moratoriums. As I've mentioned many times before, it's an unlawful taking of private property for public use without just compensation. That's what an eviction moratorium is. Unconstitutional in every single way. But you know what? They are going to push the limits of what they think is constitutional and try to impose these sorts of things. Well, at least not in the state of Missouri, not where I invest, not where I own real estate. So before I get into the article, go ahead, hit the like, subscribe button, and leave a comment down below. Let me know what you think. So do you think that this is a good idea overall? Keep in mind what I just said before. If there is a political shift statewide where more, anti-landlord, anti-property rights politicians are present throughout the entire state, they could lock into place very anti-landlord laws that you wouldn't be able to, even if your city or your county doesn't agree with those laws, you wouldn't be able to opt out of them. So this could end up being a bad thing in the long term. But for now, this is at least to me, it seems like a good way to keep eviction moratoriums from happening again in the short term. But what do you think? Put down in the comments what you think. But anyway, let's get into this article and see what it says. This article is coming from newstalkkzrg.com, and it says, Missouri House passes bill in rebuke of federal eviction moratoriums. Yeah, and the House passed it. It still has to go through the Senate, and the governor has to sign it. I have faith because there was such bipartisan consensus on this bill that it is very likely to pass. So anyway, let's see what the article says. In a crucial development for housing policies in Missouri, the House of Representatives has successfully passed House Bill 2062 this week, addressing eviction moratoriums. Sponsored by State Representative Chris Brown, the bill garnered bipartisan support, passing with a decisive vote of 111 to 26. HB 2062 seeks to prohibit counties, municipalities, or political subdivisions from implementing eviction moratoriums unless explicitly allowed by state law. The legislation aims to address concerns raised by supporters who argue that eviction moratoriums infringe on property rights and disrupt contracts between landlords and tenants, emphasizing that eviction is governed by state law. And I'm glad that there was bipartisan support, because this isn't a political thing, okay? Eviction moratoriums hurt you no matter if you are, voting for Democrats or if you're voting for Republicans. It hurts you regardless. It hurts property rights as a whole, okay? I know plenty of people who are much more left-leaning and vote differently than I do, and they would be unable to evict tenants if eviction moratorium is in place. And they'd be screaming bloody murder when they're not getting paid rent and they have to house this person for free. So, it discourages people from wanting to be landlords, and that will lead to less housing supply for tenants on top of that. So this isn't helping tenants either. This isn't helping landlords or tenants. The only people it's helping are people who abuse the system. People who want to live for free, don't want to pay rent, and want the government to back them up. That's idiotic. Okay, there's better ways to deal with this. And one of my things is, if they are so concerned that this is a problem, then they need to think about government rental assistance programs. Now, I'm not a fan of government rental assistance either. I think it's a complete joke, but I think it's a better option than telling a landlord that you cannot ever evict this tenant as long as this eviction moratorium is in place. I think that is just illegal, okay? Representative Chris Brown, the bill's sponsor, clarified the intent of HB 2062 on the House floor, stating, "The goal of this legislation is not to force renters out, but rather to establish a uniform rule applicable to all in the state." He pointed to the necessity of a consistent rule to prevent an unsustainable situation for landlords and avoid fragmented approach with municipalities issuing their own moratoriums. And I agree with him. But I agree a step further than he agrees. And I understand he's just a state representative, right? But there shouldn't be, all these different states that are imposing their own eviction moratoriums, okay? If it's unconstitutional in Missouri, it's unconstitutional nationwide, okay? The Supreme Court, when they made the decision to get rid of the CDC's eviction moratorium, it wasn't based on the fact that it was unconstitutional. They got rid of the federal eviction moratorium because they said the CDC didn't have the power to impose it. But I wish that they had gone further and ruled that all of them, every single eviction moratorium in the entire country, is illegal because it violates the Constitution. That's what I wanted to see. That's not what we saw, though. Okay, fortunately the stuff ended, but there still is the possibility that who knows what the next pandemic or crisis or emergency that's going to happen is going to cause. Okay, it might cause states like California and New York to impose new eviction moratoriums, or they might just say, well, climate change is causing such a problem that we need to have an eviction moratorium, or in order to face racial equity, we're going to make it so there's an eviction. They could claim anything they want and impose an eviction moratorium, tell the landlords they can't evict their tenants, and then those landlords are just stuck. They're just stuck. And the Supreme Court, rather than just sitting there and just saying, hey, we're going to handle this issue once and for all, say that these things are 100% illegal, even if it isn't directly addressed in the lawsuit that they were facing, they should have tackled that issue, okay? It's so simple. But no, they didn't do that, so I'm disappointed. They call themselves a more conservative Supreme Court, but they are, dancing tiptoe around the actual issue. And, it just pisses me off, okay? The issue began with a federal moratorium imposed by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention during the COVID-19 pandemic that resulted in financial hardships for property owners. After the U.S. Supreme Court invalidated the federal moratorium in 2021, St. Louis and St. Louis County had implemented local eviction moratoriums. Property owners, however, were still obligated to pay the cost of the properties, including taxes, though they had no legal recourse to remove delinquent tenants. Yeah, they had to pay more than just the taxes, okay? I know that that's what St. Louis County and St. Louis City, imposed their own local eviction moratoriums, and then they still demanded landlords pay their taxes. That's a bunch of crap, okay? But the landlords still also had to pay their insurance premiums. They had to pay any mortgage or loan payments that they had. They had to pay for upkeep on the property, okay? Capital expenditures. They had to pay any staff. They had to pay all of their bills, and they had no income coming in from those tenants who were using the eviction moratorium to live for free. This is not sustainable. And don't give me that garbage about how the rental assistance program, it made landlords whole. Landlords literally, even with rental assistance money, lost millions of dollars that they will never get back. Remember, only certain tenants even qualified for the rental assistance, but all the tenants were qualifying for the eviction moratorium. Isn't that funny how that works? What a joke, okay? So I'm 100% opposed to eviction moratoriums, like I said, because of the constitutionality of it. But you know what? I wish that there could have been a lawsuit against these cities and these municipalities for passing something that was unconstitutional. A lawsuit that would get all the way to the Supreme Court saying, hey, you have to compensate these landlords for their losses. Oh, well, you know what? Everybody's like, oh, just forget about it. It's the past. Well, the problem is that this same thing will happen again. It might not be right now, okay? It might not be 20 years from now. It might be 50 years from now. I might be dead. But they will be like, well, look, they set a precedent saying this stuff was illegal, or that eviction moratoriums were legal, so we're going to do it again. And that's what I don't want to happen.